All right, welcome everyone to When a Magazine Becomes a Digital Experience. We are joined today by Sonia Sherwood. She is the Executive Director and Internal Communications and Publications at Drexel University. So thank you for joining us today, Sonia.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. And there are still people popping in, but we wanted to get started to not delay things. Before we get into the content, I just wanted to remind everyone that we will be checking the chat as we go throughout the session today. So if you have a question, please feel free to pop it in there. And I will be keeping an eye on it and we will try to address it. I do have a list of questions for Sonia here today, but this is a live format and we want to hear from you. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to add things into the chat, and we will also save some time at the end for a Q&A. If there are additional questions, if we pass by your question earlier on, if the chat's busy, then I will definitely make sure I address it at the end, but please feel free to pop it back in if I do miss it. I don't think I introduced myself. Many of you may be familiar with me, but I am Megan Riley. I am the art director here at Iris Creative, and Sonia and I work very closely together on this project. So we're excited to talk to you about it today. So if there are no questions before we get started, oh, one last thing in the chat, it's automatically set to send to the host and panelists. If you hit the little arrow next to it and change it to everyone, that we highly recommend that and appreciate it if you do that because then everyone can see the questions you're asking. It just makes this entire format more collaborative. We see this as a community of nonprofit marketers, and you may have a question that you want to add on to someone else's question. You may have an answer, you may have an idea, something that you've tried. So please feel free to use that chat area to collaborate with each other, have some conversation, and pop some questions in there as we go. So if there are no questions, then we are going to get started. I'm going to stop sharing. Um, and Sonia, can you start off by telling us about the publications that you produce at Drexel?
Yeah. So um, I worked for 13 years at Drexel University in the Central Marcoms office, and our responsibility is the reputation side of Drexel and reaching out to a host of different audiences through a lot of different kinds of publications. So we are a versatile crew of three at the moment. We handle internal newsletters, a couple of magazines that go some internal, some external. We've done newspaper broadsheets for our employees and both print digital reports and then one-off reports like anniversary booklets and things like that. So we're all about versatility and doing a lot of different things and speaking to a lot of different audiences and tuning the publications to those audiences. Our flagship is Drexel Magazine. We have a huge number of alumni. It's about 200,000. It also goes to our co-op employers and to our staff. And our mission with everything is just reputation and awareness. We try through our content strategy to package really engaging content so that we can get people to also look at our institutional content and some of our programming content, maybe asks for donations or invitations to event planning. So it's like feeding people muffins to get them to eat bran.
Excellent. And so as we get into all of this, we are going to quickly just give you a little lay of the land. So Drexel Magazine, as Sonia mentioned, is one of their biggest publications, and that is the piece that she and I work closely on, and that we've brought from a print to a digital format. And so I'm going to share my screen and show you what the print piece looked like. Just so that as we show you what the digital piece now looks like, we can talk about how that transition worked. Um, some of the decisions that Sonia had to make when thinking about the transition from print to digital about the content and how it had to be restructured in order to work in this new format. So I'm going to show you. So this is an example of what their print magazine looked like. Very, very editorial. Lots of illustration, lots of different sections. There are some definite repeatable sections, like this 7 characters that we're in the process of rebuilding at the moment. And Sonia, please feel free to jump in if there's anything you want to touch on here. This is another repeatable section called Time and Place that we are trying to reimagine for the digital space as well. Features. So this just gives you an idea. It's a very visual, and I mean it's a beautiful magazine that you produced. And so that had this crossword, which we'll touch on later at the end. Um, and so it's a beautiful piece that they made the decision to transition into a digital format. And so I'm going to pop over and show you what we call the landing page. It's also like a table of contents kind of page in Drexel Magazine. And Sonia, when I'm showing this, if you want to talk a little bit about some of this content strategy that we had to think through, I think that would be helpful. So let me share this. So this is the animated masthead at the top. And as we scroll through, you'll see the different stories.
So that masthead was, because we don't have a cover. So we've got to somehow dynamically say, hey, this is a big deal. And then each of these X's when they go out is highlighting a different feature story, which is kind of fulfilling what a cover used to do when it would have cell lines on it.
So that's the letter from the president that used to be on the inside. It's now just on this table of contents page. We have the feature stories that we're highlighting in a more visual way, like is often done in a magazine. And then we have these new sections. So there is news, discoveries, people, and crosswalk. And I'll let you jump in here and kind of talk about how you thought about the restructuring, because these weren't the section titles before, correct?
Right, right. We had to dramatically we had to go through the entire magazine and decide what to keep, what to not keep, and then what we wanted to keep, but that needed to be really revised, re-evolved for this format. And so like the news section used to be that whole front of the book of the magazine. And we instead decided to create one long scroll out of it so that it would kind of keep people going from one story to the next. And this, I want to get into scrolling in general because the scrolly telling format of the platform that we chose was intentional, because with a magazine, the biggest value is that people will kind of get this big package and it'll allow them to kind of flip through and see things that they otherwise wouldn't have seen. And it will kind of carry them through. They'll see something interesting, they'll jump around, they'll get exposure to things that they weren't necessarily expecting. And we wanted to avoid a website like our previous incarnation of this website, where it was just a replication of the magazine that was a static blog. And it mimicked the magazine, but it didn't really have a lot of story hierarchy. And all of the stories were designed the same way. We wanted a scroll so that you would go from one feature to the next like you would in a magazine without having too many reasons to jump away. But we found that we had too much content to make it one long scroll. And just as a little background, I kind of got in touch with Iris because they had done a magazine for the Philadelphia Horticultural Society. And it
Mhm.
was one long continuous scroll, and I liked it because I was looked at it and realized there's nothing pulling me away from this content. I'm seeing it all. It's still carrying me through. So we were trying to work with that, but then there were also other compromises that we had to make. So we ended up doing something that was a little hybrid. So the features had
Yes.
that scroll, and then within that we had some subcategories that are their own separate scroll. And then
Yes, which was necessary because you guys have
yeah,
so much, it's just so much content.
right.
We couldn't have it all in one long scroll.
Yeah. And then when you get down to the people section, that's where we grouped all of the stories that had been standalone, unique departments. Each of one in the magazine, each of them had their own special design that repeated from issue to issue. And we wanted to keep that quality because that's what makes a magazine feel curated and intentional and like an assembly. So we designed templates for each. Each is unique, but they also sort of have design cues that line up with each other to make it feel cohesive. And for example, we could look at the From the Dax stories,
Yes.
where you see how this opens with a logo of the dragon and the two side-by-side squares, and then it goes into a story.
Yes. And then
And
this one does the same.
and then if you go to the next one, it has the same, the logo, title, and then it goes into a story. And there's differences within them, but we wanted to do it this way because, again, it's the magazine feeling of a regular department, and because it also saves on our manpower. We don't have to recreate a design for each individual one with each issue. It's something we can just drop the text in more or less and then do a little tweaking.
Yes. I'm gonna show you this one again. I didn't really fully show this. So very similar feelings, just a little more templated with
Mm.
slight tweaks. Okay. And then I guess we'll show a feature as well. So this is something that I just wanted to point out because it happened to pop up. We added in some polls into the website that appear as you go to the different digital magazines. And this, along with some forms that we've added to the website as well, have definitely provided more information for Sonia. So do you want to mention anything about that? As
Yeah, this was an option with this platform that we really liked because we were able to do like a quick check of people's sentiment with polls that come up when they're looking at particular stories, or an overall. We did a poll overall when we first launched it to say, what do you think of the design, to just get a temperature check. And it wasn't possible with our previous website. So this was just, like a value add that was made possible with the platform that
Mhm.
we appreciate.
Yeah. And then with the website forms, people are able to just submit story ideas and submit for 40 under 40, which we'll be showing you in a minute. And all of that just right there on the website, which just saves a step. It makes things a little bit easier. So this is an example of one of the features from this issue. This was about Drexel magazine or Drexel's newspaper that had kind of gone away and they brought it back. And about a donor that had donated to bring it back. So this just kind
Oh,
of shows. Yep.
one thing I want to highlight, because this was not just a redesign project for us, it was also a content strategy reevaluation. We changed how we write stories and how we write headlines. These stories are intentionally now modular, and by modular I mean chunky. So notice we've got three people here and each has their own chunk of copy that makes up its own little block. We're consciously trying to do that in how we tell stories, because it allows us to, well, I feel like it's easier to read online when you've got chunks. It's a more natural way to read, I think, for modern readers because we're so used to reading small, digestible amounts at a time through on our phones. It also works well with this platform and the way that you use blocks to design a page. Um, and then we're changing up how we write headlines too. We used to write these sort of elegant but pithy little literary magazine type headlines that they weren't always all that clear as to what the story was. But because we're online, we want it to be more of an SEO headline that is keyword rich and usually in a sentence structure, you know, or a clickbaity type of headline so that we're responsive to the medium that people are now reading it on.
Yeah. And Stephanie popped in the chat. She asked what the platform is. I'm sorry, we didn't even mention it. It's called Shorthand. And we are going to be touching on some of the benefits and some of the challenges in choosing this platform and the different platforms that we looked at. I mean, I actually can probably just touch on it right now. So, with Sonia, we did, well, before even working with Sonia, we've done over the years a lot of different exploration around different softwares and the benefits and challenges of each one. We've looked into, there was a platform, I don't even know if it's still around anymore, called Mag Plus. That was a great digital magazine platform that existed for a little while. There's one called Vev. This one's called Shorthand. And we've also explored different ways to build out a website in ways to make it feel editorial. So there's a bunch of different directions that you can go when developing a digital publication. This particular magazine uses Shorthand, and Shorthand's who we also used for Pennsylvania Horticultural Society's magazine. Um, they're it's a great tool, but it does have its challenges. It's a fairly user-friendly tool, which is great. That definitely benefits from having some knowledge of editorial, for sure. It allows you to get a little bit more out of it. And so we chose this platform because it was what worked best with Sonia and her team and what their needs were. But there are many different, and the price point worked for them. Vev is a little more expensive than what Shorthand is, and some of the other options can be more expensive, can be less expensive. Just it all depends on what you're doing, exactly what you're creating. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to touch on specifically. And I mean, Sonia, do you remember why exactly Shorthand was the right path versus other digital options? I think it was really just the scrolly telling format was why we really liked Shorthand. It's really built for that. And um,
Yeah,
and
I was really attracted to scrolly telling because it allowed you to be interactive and modular and to be more creative than other things that I was looking at. At the same time, it was a no code solution, and so we could avoid the cost of custom coding. And the
Mhm.
no code allowed us to envision our own staff uploading stories in between production schedules when we weren't working with an outside designer because it was straightforward enough.
Mhm.
Our goals when we set out for this were engagement, affordability, accessibility, and interactivity. And that gave us a good combination of the ability to do visual storytelling in a responsive design. It was easy to use and it was relatively low technical maintenance.
Mhm. And before I close out, I wanted to show one more feature, and this really just shows a cool. This is one that we did in this last issue, and it shows one of the more interesting kind of features that this tool has. So it allows you to zoom in and add content to an image so that you can basically tell a story around one piece of an image, which works very well with that time and place story that we were showing you earlier in the print piece. And it worked well with this specific idea that we had for this article where we have a map of Philadelphia and we're talking about different buildings that were owned by the Drexel family. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, this is the story's conceit is that this is strolling through Philadelphia.
Yes.
So as we're seeing copy, we're also moving around the city and seeing different parts of the city. So it helps with storytelling. It's not just a static feature.
Yeah. So I am going to stop sharing now and we'll get into the rest of our questions. Please remember, if you have any questions of your own, please pop them into the chat and we'll be happy to answer them. So now that we've seen what the digital piece looks like, what I forgot to show 40 under 40, so I'll show that in a little bit as well. So what led you to think about turning your print magazine to digital? What was the driving force behind that decision?
So we were in the middle of 2024 when we had an enrollment dip and we had to do budget cuts. And we had been shrinking our budgets and dealing with raising costs for years. So we'd already done renegotiations of paper, reduced print runs, tried flip books. But postage and print were always going up. It was always going to be an increasing problem. And so that was just the last straw. And it was costing more and more to produce the magazine anyway, because we have an extra 5,000 people receiving it every year when people graduate. So we had 200 plus alumni, and it was costing 200 grand to print it. We needed to get that down to like 70.
Mhm.
At the same time, our readers preferred print. We'd done surveys. Most of them are, the average age is 50. Even our provost and our interim president preferred print. But we had other considerations, which is modernization. Our old website had last been revamped in 2018. It wasn't accessible. It was just a repository for magazine stories. It looked like the magazine, but the magazine look was changing. It was kind of haphazardly maintained. And so we needed something that was able to stand on its own, and it needed to be engaging. It needed to be more branded, to more aligned with how Drexel was looking, because that's how we've been moving everything anyway. And it needed to be financially sustainable. And we
Mhm.
also had the 40 under 40 to consider and our science magazine to consider. So this process forced us to think holistically about all of our publications and all of our budget and our staff and our mission to right size everything for the future. So we also changed the content strategy and changed the workflow and just right sized it to match our resources.
Yeah.
And when I say change the content strategy, I mean we also just stories are actually shorter. We have new story types that are easier to produce. And that was definitely part of the consideration in moving to the web.
And I'm going to show 40 under 40 so that we can talk about like this is a good example of some of those shorter stories, how we had to share things a little bit differently um, with the user. So this again has that same animated masthead where the X is showing features. Instead, it's showing some of the people that were featured in 40 under 40. It still has that letter from the president. And this is some examples of some of those shorter stories. So I'll click on one so that you can see what this looks like. And this was just a different way of imagining the content, and something that we had talked about when we first decided, when we were first going into 40 Under 40, that I think really serves well in the digital platform is that each featured person, except for the ones that are featured together, have their own story. So they then can share that link out publicly without sharing the entire magazine or linking out to a blog post. Like it looks like a beautiful piece that then can be shared publicly, which was a big decision that we made in this process. Was there anything else we wanted to say about 40 Under 40? I just wanted to touch on that because as we were talking about that the choice to go digital, that is something that is nice, is that you can share, like stories themselves can be shared publicly and they look a little bit nicer and more editorial and just more beautiful than when they were just on the blog.
Yeah. And one little like tech tweak we had to do there is um having the read more button so that it goes to a separate page just for that person was essential to make it shareable. So another reason why we didn't just do one long scroll is that this way they each have their own individual URL.
Yeah. And something else, as Sonia had mentioned, just branding and keeping it branded to look as much like just within that Drexel ecosystem. All of the button styles match the button styles on Drexel University's website. All of the headlines and fonts, for the most part, we do have some fonts that are specific to the magazine only. But that was a decision that was made within the entire team, including with the creative director, to just make sure things still felt Drexel University, but the magazine could live on its own and have its own identity in some ways. Um, we always like to talk branding here, so I wanted to mention that. Um, okay, so the content was already available as a blog, which we've kind of been touching on. So why was keeping the magazine in a format that felt like a magazine rather than just using the blog content important? You've kind of touched on this, but if there's anything additional you wanted to add, I wanted to give you the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to preserve the hierarchy of article types and the sense of a curated package and the power of a great layout to tell a story or augment a story. But strategically, it mattered because the magazine is a premium product. It's a premium reputation product, and we wanted to retain the perceived value that people associate with receiving a magazine. Our alumni deserve it, and there's inside baseball, but there's, some angst amongst alumni that they've literally told us that the magazine is the only thing that Drexel's ever given them for free. I mean, they got a degree, but other than that, um, and our brand research had showed us that of all of our audiences, alumni are the most aware and the most positively disposed toward the university. So that's goodwill that we'd managed to build, and I didn't want to just damage that by making this feel like a downgrade or to cheapen it. It's
Mhm.
we're a top 100 university, and this is the most conspicuous publication that we put out to alumni, so it should reflect that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're making this choice, even when it's the best choice for the university for financial reasons, for every reason, transitions can be hard. And so what we I want to talk about some of the challenging parts of building the new magazine. Um, is there anything in particular you want to start with as far as challenges as we've gone into this?
Well, we talked about the that we had to move away from having a continuous scroll. And that wasn't like fully not everybody was on board with that anyway, because it is a lot of content that would have been
Mhm.
a lot to scroll. But we ended up with the hybrid. The trade-off was, the immersiveness of a scroll versus the ability to individually share stories by having their own URL.
Mhm.
And having those page performance analytics was valuable to us. So we did that with the hybrid. And I think we mostly maintained the issue experience. Mostly it's scrolls, but this allowed us to still share and to measure. So
Yeah.
that was one of the big decisions that we made. Another one that was tied to maintaining the magazine feel was, like we showed with the From the DAC stories, creating recurring templates. Just like with a magazine, you have departments, they always look alike, they're recognizable, people are familiar with them, and they're used to the content always kind of um, having the same strategy within that bucket.
Mhm.
So we did that across a number of our regular story features, and it saved us from having to do bespoke design for everything every time. Um, it's familiar for readers and preserves that hierarchy of stories. And now that we have the templates, we can just drop fresh content in and we don't have to do a reinvention. So
Mhm.
that's the kind of consistency that if you're trying to mimic a magazine without really mimicking a magazine, it's good to import because it still has a magazine quality.
Yeah. One of the challenges that I know you all ran into when building out the first issue was that there was a crossword puzzle in the old magazine that as we went into the platform, we could not figure out a way to make them work together. And so that was something that was unexpected. We had to lose that. Um, and that things like that do come up when you're using a platform and when you're making a transition. Um, so just that's just something to keep in mind that sometimes there's unexpected things like that come up.
Yeah, I mean, it's just technological incompatibility. Our crossword puzzle maker used a Mac program to build his digital crosswords, and our platform would only accept a PC platform, and never the two should meet. So, um, we're just we can explore other things, maybe other crossword puzzle makers or whatever, but we just moved on without that this time.
Yeah. Yeah. And something else that we kind of ran into that was an interesting challenge was actually wasn't related to the magazine at all. It was actually related to emailing out the magazine to everyone. So when we were using MailChimp, we ran into some challenges with the experience not looking exactly the same from phone to phone, from device to device, I guess would be the word, but it was specifically on Android phones. And so there was a lot of challenges around that. So if you want to talk about that a little bit and what you've
Yeah.
decided to do,
So, and this
and
is
I'll
the
show it.
biggest challenge, I think, of having a digital publication is that you're changing your platform and it can be amazing, but you still have to deliver through email, like a newsletter. There's no other way if you're not printing it and mailing it to a person's house. So we had a MailChimp subscription already that we've used for our internal newsletters. And the design looked good on most of our platforms, except for Gmail, Android, mobile. It got clipped and the stacking, we have these two column formats. The stacking didn't stack well. Um, and so we had to decide, do we simplify for mobile delivery at the expense of a layout? Do we fix it with custom code, even though that would cost more? Or do we maybe create a second version that only goes to a subset of Gmail readers? And we had data internally. We learned that only a small portion of our internal readers were using both Gmail and Android mobile. So we went ahead and just sent it as is and decided that was what we would do then and come back to it another time. But since then, we've learned that our second mailing, which just goes to alumni audiences, because we send to internal and alumni, they're actually more likely to use Gmail. So going forward, we're going to have to tackle that again. And I think that the developer's idea will be to switch from the classic builder to a legacy, not from the legacy builder to a new builder that uses a lot more HTML. Still not custom coding, but it's a more complicated builder, and it'll allow them to clean up code. They said the code will junk it up, and that's why it was getting cut off in Gmail email platforms. And we may just have to move to a simpler layout as well.
Mhm.
So that's, a bummer. And there might be different email platforms besides MailChimp where that wouldn't be the case. I know I've heard of Stripo being an interesting one that somebody else who uses shorthand uses. Um,
Interesting.
so there's things to explore, but for now it was just an unexpected wrinkle.
Hmm. And there's all kinds of unexpected challenges. I mean, but if you're going to a digital platform, it does make sense that you want the experience to be beautiful everywhere, whether it's email or as they're looking at the magazine itself. And so just interesting challenges that are always unexpected things that come up. Um, One of the other things that I think is important to address is that we had to take accessibility into account quite a bit as we've gone through this process. As Sonia mentioned before, the old website wasn't super accessible. And so we've had to make a lot of adjustments to the magazine itself to make it accessible. Everything from making sure that everything is tagged properly, that we have alt tags on all of the images, that we have just all of that extra language that's necessary um, on there, that everything is readable with a screen reader. Matt, the accessibility person at Drexel, and I have worked very closely going through each issue to make sure that we're hitting all of the accessibility standards that they're looking for. There was an interesting challenge that we ran into related to what is it? The skip to main content button, because in the design, I can pull it up because it may be helpful to just kind of quickly show you. In the design, there is a navigation bar that's below the website navigation, which was just an interesting little challenge. Because when you hit skip to main content, it wasn't skipping past that navigation, it was only skipping past this navigation. And so there was a lot of work that we had to put in back and forth, trying to just deal with the code and figure it out. And we ended up getting it to skip so that when that button does appear when using a screen reader, that you can just skip right down to the view from main. And so that there's just interesting challenges that have come up. Obviously things like color, we've addressed in some places we've decided to keep it for the integrity of the design. But whenever we make a decision that's slightly less accessible for any reason, it's always a conscious decision that requires a lot of conversation. Um, but I think it's important to think about when you're moving from print to digital, that that is something that you are able to do. You are able to make your content accessible to everyone, whereas it may not have been. It definitely isn't in the print version. So some interesting challenges that, again, unexpected, that some of these things wouldn't work and that we had to just dig in and figure them out. Were there any other challenges you want to talk about? Because it definitely hit on a lot.
Yeah, I mean, one big one that's kind of related to what you were just saying is that when we were doing the archives, we had to, accessibility was an element there because we had 15 years of past issues within WordPress that we didn't want to lose, that needed to be brought into the new design and look relatively kosher to match the new design. And we debated whether to bring them all over or to just bring the past 3 years over. And ultimately, we decided to bring them all over for sort of a future proofing-ish reason and also for an accessibility reason. So right now on our website, we have the shorthand stories, but in addition, we have a totally duplicate set of the exact same stories that are in a plain blog format. And we did that because A, if anybody's struggling with the shorthand version in terms of accessibility, they have that other version as a backup, which is just plain. But then in addition, for future proofing, when you're dealing with a software as service platform like shorthand, even though they say that you'll be able to hold on to your content and own it and transport it and export it if they ever go out of business or if you ever leave them, that hasn't been fully tested. And we have
Mhm.
some anecdotal information that maybe it's not as easy as they say. This way, all of our assets are permanently with us no matter what. And someday down the road, there's eventually going to be a desire to import these into Drexel's content management system. And we don't know how well that will work with using shorthand. It's not going to work to
Mhm.
use the shorthand and bring that in, but it will with these WordPress versions. So that was a big decision. I'm really glad we made it. It was
Mhm.
forward thinking. It's going to save us from grief in the future, I think. And it leverages it preserves our leverage when we're negotiating with the platform, which had some interesting pricing negotiations I could go into. But um, yeah, so that was a big decision. Uh, and I'm glad we landed where we are.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, and with any platform, as Sonia mentioned, there are always challenges just in dealing with the platform itself, in dealing with pricing, and dealing with support. Sometimes support can be challenging. Um, for the most part, we're very happy with this tool, but every tool has its things. And so there's always positives and negatives and things to consider. Um, but absolutely making that decision to keep things on the blog. It also just preserves any SEO that you have. It preserves, it's there as a future proof. And I think I agree with you that making that decision was the right move. I'm glad that we came to that. Um, when you made this decision, again, big decision. It was definitely a lot of work, big decision to make this huge change. As you mentioned, alumni a lot of this time would say this is the one thing that the university gave to them for free. So did you have any concerns about how alumni would react when they got the first digital issue? And what made you think that it might be okay?
Well, we had gone digital in part earlier, because we'd been sort of gradually going from fewer issues to let everybody know that half of the issues each year would be only online and send out postcards. And so there was a lot of changes leading up to this. Over the past 5 years, my biggest worry was that alumni wouldn't even notice because they're so kind of confused by all the changes that
Mhm.
they
Yeah.
don't really know what to expect right now. Um, there've been a lot of disruptions, but there's been no outrage. We did know that they preferred print, but no outrage.
Mhm.
The little polls have been positive and readership numbers are up. People have responded like this is just sort of an unfortunate inevitability, basically.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I,
And
yeah,
early traffic says that the transition has increased reach. So
that's great.
yeah. Not so much engagement though. We can talk about that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So we've had one complete year now for comparison where we've had two full issues, a regular issue and a 40 under 40. And so we can compare it to 2023 when we did that too. And we do have much greater reach. Overall active users are up 79%. Just for the regular issue, the traffic is up 55%. For the 40 under 40 issue, it was up 28%. I'm thrilled to say that now, for the first time, when you do a Google search for Drexel Magazine, it's the first thing that comes up in the rankings. had never happened before. And then like weird elements of engagement are showing up. Like we created for the first time a submission page that tells you the guidelines for story submissions and how to reach the editor. We had that before, but it was kind of minor. And how to submit things for class notes or for an obituary. And people are using those. I'm getting people submitting story ideas, which are valuable to me because as an editor responsible for multiple magazines, I'm the only person looking for art or looking for articles for this audience. And so having freelancers or alumni suggest things is just a huge relief. I'm right now working with 6 freelancers who have come up with viable unsolicited ideas, and that's new. Um, the negatives are that active engagement time per user is down. I think that might be because stories are shorter, but in addition, views per user are down, which means people are less likely to go to a second story. And that's
Mm.
something that we need to address going forward. I think we have some ideas though. A main one is that we don't really have a feature or a component where you can see related stories at the end of a story.
Yeah,
So that's something we can look at to fix that when we go forward.
absolutely. And that's one of the nice things. I mean, with any project, there's always, as you get data, just new ideas that come up that help to improve that engagement and all of that. So that's excellent. And so what does long-term success look like for you?
I mean, just continuing to hit what we intended to do with this, which is to keep people engaged, grow that engagement through features like related stories, eventually get to a point where we can make use of shorthand simplicity to publish articles between issues.
Hmm.
Um, so that we're producing interesting things and it's not a drain on our resources, both in terms of our budget and our manpower.
Awesome. So as we are wrapping up, we have about 10 minutes left. I have one more question for Sonia, but if any of you have any questions at all about this transition, about challenges that she's faced, about anything, please feel free to pop it into the chat. This is a great time to do that. We're happy to answer anything. And while we're waiting for that answer, um, or waiting for your questions to pop in, I wanted to see what advice do you have for someone else that's considering their digital options?
I have some guiding principles to help you narrow down all the different options. For
Hmm.
us, it was curated interactivity, mobile friendliness, accessibility, visual storytelling. It also had to be affordable and easy to use and maintain. That eliminated a lot of other possible paths.
Yeah.
And then decide, do an audit, of your existing publication, decide what you actually want to preserve in print, what needs to stay or go or evolve. And if you change your medium, you will probably have to or should probably think about changing how you write too, because online has different, for SEO, you just need to do things differently if you want to get readership. So for us, it was chunky storytelling, and we began to write alt tags very differently so that they would be more likely to be clipped by generative AI search engines.
Hmm.
So that was a big change.
Yeah.
And then, don't expect digital to simply eliminate the work because we've also brought in Q&A and platform management and lots of things take the place of working with a printer.
Yeah, definitely. For sure. It's new challenges and new work that you have to do. It's not less necessarily. Well, if there are no questions, I want to preserve everyone's time. So I appreciate you all being here and participating. Sonia, thank you so much for joining us. As we mentioned, brand is important in everything. especially as we made this transition to this digital magazine. So if you are interested and haven't already signed up, our All About Brand conference is on September 10th, and it's an all-day free virtual conference. So if you are interested, please hop in, or please feel free to register. And oh, John just popped in with a question. He said, when people want to follow up about something they can see in a story, how can they do that?
Yeah, there's a contact the editor button. We used to, in our old format, have comments that you could leave at the end of stories, and we decided not to do that. Leadership didn't want it, and I was like, okay, because then I don't have to moderate it.
Yeah. Awesome. Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Sonia. Thank you to everyone who participated, who joined us today, and we'll see you next month. Thanks. Bye.
You're right. Thanks.